Good morning, everyone. I'd like to open today's meeting and welcome everyone in the gallery, everyone watching online, and of course my councillor colleagues to this morning's meeting. I invite you to stand as Councillor Law acknowledges the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today.
Thank you. Good morning. Mayor, councillors, CEO, executive, and all First Nations people with us today. I wish to acknowledge the Gubbi Gubbi and Unitywater people of the Sunshine Coast and pay our respects to their elders past and present. Today, as we approach NAIDOC Week, 50 years of Deadly, I would like to share the NAIDOC acknowledgement of country. We acknowledge all First Peoples of the beautiful lands on which we live and celebrate their enduring knowledge and connections to country. We honour the wisdom and pay respect to elders past and present. This year's theme, 50 Years of Deadly, 5th of July to the 12th of July. NAIDOC Week celebrations are held across Australia in the first week of July every year from Sunday to Sunday to celebrate and recognise the history, culture and achievements of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. NAIDOC Week is an opportunity for all Australians to learn about our First Nations cultures and histories and participate in celebrations of the oldest continuous living culture on Earth. For 5 decades, NAIDOC Week has celebrated the voices of our communities, steady, unapologetic and proud. Each year, its themes have called for truth, celebrated culture, honoured resistance and reminded the nation of who they are. 50 Years of Deadly marks a milestone. It's a tribute to the people who built this movement, the elders who stood firm, the organisers who made space, the artists who turned resistance into expression, and the communities who keep showing up year after year. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Law. Now, if you're able, please remain upstanding as I invite Pastor Josh Bradford from Anthem Church to provide a blessing. Thank you.
Thank you, Manatoli. Let's pray. Father in heaven, we thank you for creating this beautiful part of the world we call home. We thank you for the honour that we have to steward and to serve the city of the Sunshine Coast and its people. In this noisy and busy world, we do pause to acknowledge your presence. I ask that you bring peace and wisdom and guide the conversations and decisions made today. I thank you for the great love that you've shown to us in Jesus Christ, and may we carry the same kind of heart for people that he had, to see the broken healed, the isolated brought into community, the young and vulnerable valued, and may every home know peace, provision and safety. Let this room today be filled with incredible vision for our city and uncommon unity, even in differences. May the decisions today preserve what's precious whilst empowering growth and innovation. As our councillors give their time and energy today to serve others, I ask that you'd strengthen and encourage them, protect their families, and when they get home tonight, let the pressure of public office lift off them so they can be present with those that they love. Lastly, Father, we'd quietly ask you to hurry along the Sunshine Coast motorway upgrade project so that we can all get home sooner. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Pastor, for bringing a little light humour to the morning. Thank you, and please be seated. Now, I note that we are all in attendance here this morning. However, Councillor Ted Hungerford will be on leave next month, Councillor.
That's correct. Through you, Madam Mayor. My beautiful wife, Julie, and I will be on our annual holiday. Normally, I can plan the holiday around the dates, and even previously I've been able to log online from where I am in a fixed position, but this time I'll be in transit, so it'll be a little more difficult to attend. So I ask for a leave of absence for the 23rd of July's ordinary meeting.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor. Someone moved that we note it. Councillor Njoli, seconded Councillor Dixon. I put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? So that is carried unanimously. We will note that you're not with us and we wish you all the best and happy holiday for the time that you're away, Councillor. Okay, we move to item number 4, which is the receipt and confirmation of minutes. Councillors, would someone please move receipt and confirmation of the minutes from 21 May and also the special meeting on 1 June? Councillor Suarez, and seconded Councillor Natoli. All those in favour? And the motion is carried unanimously. Thank you. There is no mayoral minute today, so moving to item 6, and councillors, I remind you of the requirements of the Local Government Act of 2009, which sets out how councillors' conflicts of interest are managed for local government matters. These requirements apply to how we deal with such matters at this meeting. Should you have a conflict of interest in relation to an agenda item, please raise it at the commencement of that item. So we move now to item 7, and we have an award to acknowledge today. And Councillor Law, I understand you will acknowledge this for us.
Yep. Through you, Madam Mayor, it gives me great pleasure to acknowledge a fantastic achievement for the Sunshine Coast Council, who is the winner of the National Trust of Australia Queensland Heritage Awards 2026 in the category of Significant Projects 2019 to 2022. And it's for the Sunshine Coast Heritage Plan 2021 to 2030. This prestigious and highly respected state-level award, and it recognises not just a single project, but our leadership and commitment to best practice in cultural heritage. I wish to recognise the incredible work of Peter Connell and our Cultural Heritage Services team, along with our community members, local museums, historians, First Nation knowledge holders, who also generously gave of their stories, insights and passions for preserving our past. The Heritage Plan gives us a clear and practical framework guiding how we identify, protect and manage our heritage assets. And we are now seeing the Heritage Plan come to life through the Arts and Heritage Levy, which provides vital resourcing for museum grants, conservation projects, community programs and other initiatives like the Historians in Residence programme, which was also shortlisted for an award this year. From exhibitions and talks to digital storytelling and the digitisation of over 20,000 historic images, we are finding meaningful and engaging ways to bring our shared history to the forefront. From exhibitions and talks to digital storytelling, it's not just about preserving old places. It's about understanding what makes the Sunshine Coast unique and ensuring those stories continue to shape our identity into the future. After a pause in 2019, the National Trust Heritage Awards are back, and it's inspiring to see such strong dedication to heritage rights across Queensland. The award is something our whole community can be proud of, and thank you and congratulations to Peter and your whole team. Well done.
Okay, Councillor Law, you'd like to move the receipt of the award, and a seconder, Councillor Bunnag. Thank you. I'll put the motion to the vote. Those in favour? That is carried unanimously. Thank you. Now come down for the photo, team. Well, and for the award. I thought you'd already received the award. We'll do a mock-up. Yeah. Congratulations. Thanks for all your work. Excellent, thank you. We now move to item 8.1. And, councillors, before we begin this matter, I, Councillor Rosanna Natoli, notify that I have a prescribed conflict of interest in item 8.1, other change to development approval, Aria Property Group 1 Mooloolaba, Esplanade, Mooloolaba, to be considered at today's meeting, due to the fact that on 3 February 2024, I received an electoral gift of a voucher for 5 nights accommodation valued at $2,200 from Scott Bowering, Resort Manager of the Peninsula Beachfront Resort, located at 13 Mooloolaba, Esplanade, Mooloolaba. The Peninsula Beachfront Resort will potentially be impacted by the development application. So I will now vacate the chair and request that Deputy Mayor Maria Suarez chair the meeting for this matter. Leave home today.
Thank you. Councillor Natoli, do you have a notification of interest to advise?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I, Councillor Joe Natoli, notified that I have a prescribed conflict of interest in agenda item 8.1, other change to development approval, Aria Property Group 1 Mooloolaba, Esplanade, Mooloolaba, to be considered at the ordinary meeting on the 18th of June 2026. As Mayor, Rosanna Natoli received an election gift of a voucher for 5 nights accommodation valued at $2,200 from Scott Bauer, General Manager of Peninsula Beachfront Resort located at 13 Mooloolaba, Esplanade, Mooloolaba. The Peninsula Beachfront Resort will potentially be impacted by the development application, as I am a close associate of Mayor Natoli as defined under Section 150 EJ1 of the Local Government Act 2009. The electoral gift which she received also gives rise to a prescribed conflict of interest for myself. On this basis, in accordance with Section 150 EK of the Local Government Act 2009, I will exclude myself from any meetings while this matter is being discussed and the vote is taken.
Thank you, Councillor Natoli. Thank you, councillors. I now invite Mr. Joyce to provide a presentation.
Thank you. Morning, Councillor Suarez, CEO John, and councillors. Today here to report to a development application for another change to a development approval related to the Aria Property Group's application at 1 Mooloolaba, Esplanade, Mooloolaba. So this first slide, just as probably everyone will be very familiar with the area, it shows the site outlined in blue. Obviously, the site currently occupied by a row of commercial units and a vacant area to the rear opposite the surf club along the Esplanade in Mooloolaba. Second slide here shows some context in terms of the planning scheme. As you can see, the site sits within the tourism accommodation zone, again within that central precinct, and is also identified as specifically as Site 1 eatery within the local plan as well. The proposal is for an additional 50 hotel rooms. That would take a total of 201 hotel rooms as part of the overall development. In order to accommodate those additional hotel rooms, there will be an increase from 14 to 16 stories, which results in an overall increase in metres of 11.45. In addition, the proposal includes for the delivery of the works to undertake for the third stage of the Mooloolaba Southern Parklands, estimated as value of $7 million. In addition to that, a $500,000 contribution towards a playground within the central meeting place. And in addition to those things, the delivery of those two financial aspects and the works contribution to be delivered through an infrastructure agreement. And in addition to that, also provisions to ensure that the hotel is delivered and remains as a 5-star hotel. Just here, a little bit to information to explain how the works relate to the hotel itself. In that those southern parklands, or stage 3 of the Mooloolaba foreshore works, are currently unfunded. The precinct around the hotel where these works, well, this stage would be, provides a critical connector between the beach, the surf club itself, the wharf precinct, and the proposed development. And from an applicant perspective, the timely delivery of them is essential to support their 5-star hotel, ensuring the public realm is of a high quality and aligning also the road levels and the levels of the hotel itself with where the seawall levels have reached now following detailed design work. From an applicant perspective, failure to complete these works before the opening would impact on their performance. So in that sense, it's within their interest or seek to want to ensure that those things happen. And also from a community perspective, prevents all the prolongment of disruption to businesses and tourism within Mooloolaba. From an assessment point of view, just to explain a little bit how this assessment works within the planning scheme and the planning framework, the proposed change triggered impact assessment because it exceeds a prescribed height limit within the heights and building structures overlay. In addition, the assessment is limited to new or increased impacts, which has regard to the planning scheme or the relevant parts of the planning scheme. And in addition, because it's impact accessible, we also consideration as for any impact application, other relevant matters, which could include for planning need, as well as relevance of assessment benchmarks in light of changed circumstances. So that is giving context to the fact that the planning scheme was obviously been in place since 2014. Under the planning scheme itself, the hierarchy of how the provisions work is that if the development is consistent with the strategic framework, as in the higher order provisions of the plan, it can still be considered to be compliant overall with the whole of the planning scheme, despite any non-compliance with a specific overlay or a particular assessment benchmark. So here is a plan that shows us the conceptual plan that's being worked up through council's officers and Aria team for the stage of the foreshore works there. A subsequent plan shows how that would be staged, with the blue area there being the predominant works which tie in with the existing foreshore works being delivered by the council right now. The second stage in red there shows largely streetscape works, and then the third stage of development is further around the corner that ties in around the back of the surf club and down the road there. The first two stages of development intended to be delivered before the development becomes out of the ground, and the third stage before the hotel operates. As it was the application was subject to impact assessment, obviously went through public notification process, and for this application we received 471 submissions. Now, 85% of those submissions were in support of the development, and they raised a number of matters in support, mostly relating to the tourist and economic benefits of the proposal. Also, obviously, there were a number of submissions made that objected to the proposal, and the concerns they raised have been addressed in the following way. The height, or those that were concerned about height, have partly been addressed by the reduction of the building by 3.5 metres as a result of concerns raised and conversations with the applicant, so that brought it down a significant amount to ensure that there were no unacceptable impacts in the surrounding area and to minimise the visual impact of the building. Remembering the instance that here we're looking at the building relative to what has already been approved. The loss of a playground area from an earlier version of the foreshore plan was addressed by the council securing a financial contribution towards an alternative location. I would note that the infrastructure agreement has been signed by the applicant already and is waiting our part, so essentially that is all locked and loaded and agreed. Concerns were raised about the perception of bias addressed by establishing a connection between the development and the hotel. I've already talked through why that is a reasonable consideration, and confirmation from our team that there were no additional impacts as a result of those additional stories in terms of lighting on marine turtles. In addition, there were concerns about increased impacts potentially for waste and traffic, and we'll talk to those later. This plan shows you where the submitters came from. As you can see, there's a fairly broad range within the region and locally. So no specific pockets of development that you might get in a more residential setting where often there are more pockets of submitters based on proximity. So in this instance, we also got a large number of submitters from outside of the region and even internationally. The key assessment matters here are now set out for you within, obviously, the main being building height. So the structure itself, as I say, was gone from 14 to 16 stories, but better described as from 55 metres, which was a code accessible application, so that was the limit of what could be developed under code, to 66.45, so that's that increase of 11.45. Now that height incorporates the 2 additional stories of hotel, as well as responding to the increased height of the seawall. So in essentially the building's gone up in totality in order to match that height, as well as the floor-to-ceiling heights have been marginally increased for the hotel room floors to meet expectations for a 5-star hotel. And the roof element itself also has increased in height, as well as the lobby of the hotel. So it is noted, and there's no getting away from the fact that it exceeds the prescribed height limit. However, and that when we're looking at that, the building will be more discernible from long-range views and increased visual presence from the surrounding area. That is true. However, the building is sitting within a built form of already established coastal skyline, in the sense that the building sits within a large number of existing buildings, some of them which are comparable in height, and it doesn't impede on any strategic views or anything that's specifically called out within the planning scheme itself in a policy context. The proposal is considered to reinforce the pattern of larger buildings at either end of the Esplanade. Now, while that you wouldn't get a concept of looking at the Esplanade in totality as a skyline unless you're out to sea, you'd see that it effectively bookends the Esplanade along with the Mantra at the other end, which is actually slightly taller if you consider the spires on top of it. It would also deliver a high-quality landmark built form consistent with the strategic intent for the site, in that the site in the scheme calls out for a landmark 5-storey hotel. Proposal results in some incremental increases of shadowing. Now we've undertaken a full and detailed assessment of the shadow caused by the additional elements again, and there is a small, or doesn't increase a number of buildings or apartments that are subjected to impacts. It just increases marginally the amount of time that some of those buildings are impacted for. Then it's considered that therefore overall that there's a balance between the increased development and maintaining the amenity and identity of Mooloolaba. In that as well, that there's no impacts in terms of privacy or anything, that because again the footprint of the building remains the same. Here we can see we've picked some of the images from the 3D modelling that we produced that show the building effectively with the most significant impacts. So that was those longer range views that we talked about, where you can see that. But again, it sits in with the Buderim Mountain behind and those other buildings. So that's from Point Cartwright looking west. This view is from the Mooloolaba Spit, so up closer, where you can see the larger building. But remembering again that we have an approval for a building in that location. Here we picked out some particular shadow diagrams. So the shadowing of the other building there you can see is the most significant building affected, but as you can probably appreciate from that image, it would already have been in shadow. And we have shown another image there that shows a shadowing onto the beach, which, whilst there are other times of year where there is a larger shadow, this is the instance why we picked this one out, is because it's a new effect, as opposed to the other ones where there's a slightly increased effect. Albeit that we can see that is at 4 o'clock in the afternoon when that starts to happen. And only at particular times of the year. Other relevant matters. So because the application is impact assessment, we're able to have consideration not just for aspects within the planning scheme itself, but we can go broader than that. And in this instance, a significant matter that taken into consideration is the need for additional hotel accommodation within the Sunshine Coast. So our own studies demonstrate that there's a need for almost 2,500 additional hotel rooms, of which Mooloolaba specifically picked out for a need for more luxury accommodation in the order of around 200 units. So effectively the demand is, well, this goes towards picking up the significant shortfall for upscale and luxury accommodation within this area. In this instance, I understand it's the first hotel of this typology since 1993 with the Twin Waters itself, as well as other recent hotels in Mooloolaba, helping to address a demand in the lead up to the Olympics. The proposal responds directly to the identified gap for delivering a 5-storey hotel, to the extent that that is being picked out in the planning scheme as a requirement, and it provides a landmark building and a prime beachfront location. The application has demonstrated there is industry interest, so the applicants provided us information to that effect from large hotels, and that they were seeking a hotel of 200 or more rooms for optimal operational efficiency. Another rationale for why the applicant's seeking to change to increase the number of hotel beds. Development is considered will deliver substantial economic benefits above and beyond the hotel itself. In addition, significant construction investment, 500 construction jobs, employment generation on the site, up to 200 full-time job generated within the hotel itself, as well as increased visitor expenditure and strengthening of the Sunshine Coast tourism profile. In addition, the other relevant matter and a significant consideration for Council's perspective is that the applicant has voluntarily entered into an infrastructure agreement to fund and deliver the works which are estimated at a value of $9 million. So again, to be clear, that's the estimation as the value based on quantity surveyors and independent assessment of the cost of the works. It's not that the infrastructure agreement specifically seeks or limits that dollar value. The applicant is required to deliver the works in accordance with the plans, whatever the value ends up being. The proposal also addresses the interface issues with the updated seawall design, which is not currently picked up within the existing master plan, and includes high-quality parkland streetscape upgrades, pedestrian cycle infrastructure, landscaping, and public realm improvements. Delivery of these works provides a substantial community benefit and at no cost to Council. It enables the completion of the foreshore project, which in itself is a significant community benefit to the businesses along the front and the Esplanade in terms of reducing the amount of time that they, or perhaps having a break between the construction periods. And the completed works would support the integration between the development of the foreshore and enhancing the overall quality and usability of the public realm in this iconic location. So the infrastructure agreement itself, to explain, there's some key components within that. Obviously, it requires the applicant to undertake the completion of those southern parklands. The earlier completion of the first 2 substages, as explained before, prior to the proposed construction progressing above ground, and the 3rd stage before the use commences. The stage and sequencing and the duration of those is being designed with provisions in place to minimise disruption to the public. There is a financial contribution of $500,000 towards design and construction of a playground. All of the works and financial contributions are not creditable against the infrastructure charges, so that means that because they're a result of the development, they will still be charged the full rate from an infrastructure charge perspective. The Council have incorporated measures with the infrastructure agreement to provide checkpoints for design and approval requirements, as this will sit outside of like a usual operational works type approval. And the applicant is going to enter into a hotel management agreement with a 5-star hotel operator prior to commencement of the works. The 5-star hotel will also be operated on the site for a minimum period of 20 years. So in conclusion, the proposal does exceed the prescribed height limit. However, the Planning Act enables consideration of broader matters. In this instance, while the additional height increases visual prominence to an extent, it creates some incremental amenity impacts. These are considered to be moderate. The design reinforces the site's role as a landmark on the Esplanade. Significant weight can be given to the need for additional hotel and luxury accommodation and the delivery of the parklands themselves at no cost to council. 85% of submitters support the proposal, particularly giving rise to the economic, tourism and public realm benefits that the public can enjoy and benefit from, and the submissions considered to be addressed in relation to height, character, amenity and precedents have all been carefully considered. On balance, the identified concerns are not considered to outweigh the significant demonstrated benefit of the proposal, and it's considered that it's justified on planning grounds. Saying that we recommend that you receive and note the detailed report provided to you in your packs, that the council's entered into an infrastructure agreement, and that we approve the other change application. And note there that further requests for negotiated decisions and other changes to that will be determined by delegated council authority.
Thank you, Mr. Joyce. Before I ask for a mover, there was just an error in the value of the foreshore works. Can you please clarify?
Yes, not for the value of the foreshore. Apologise to say there was an error in a typo in the parking provision condition, so that it stated 202. It should have been 214 as the minimum car parking provision. The public art provision, there was a decimal point, was in the wrong place, but the overall dollar amount figure with 250,000 was correct, and there was one typo as well. So I apologise to councillors for those errors within the report.
Thank you, Mr. Joyce. And also during the presentation, you stated the foreshore works were valued at $7 million, but the slide said 9. Can you clarify?
9 million, yes.
Thank you. Okay, can I have a mover for this item? Councillor Landsberg, a seconder? Councillor Burns, thank you. Councillor Landsberg, would you like to speak to the item?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and thank you for the presentation, Mr. Joyce. Just may I start with a couple of questions first. The site, obviously, of this proposal, when we adopted the temporary local planning instrument in 2025, in April last year, it was actually mapped to be included as part of the TLPI. Can you give us just some background in regards to why it was removed as part of the temporary local planning instrument?
I'll probably hand over to a colleague in the context as I was working at the state government involved in assessing that TLPI at that time, so probably not appropriate for me to answer that question.
Through you, Madam Deputy Mayor, and good morning, councillors. That was removed by the Minister. It was a ministerial decision prior to the TLPI being approved.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify that for the public. So the next question is, this site, it's a key site. I believe it's number 3 on our local plan. So could we just maybe give our community a little bit of background in regards to why we identify these key sites, obviously for the type of structures that we perceive to see developed?
Thank you, and through the Chair, in response, so the planning scheme seek to proactively identify and put specific provisions in place for opportunities that had been identified to maximise development opportunities within key areas. So in the context of the Mooloolaba site here, and we've recently seen some other key sites in Caloundra being developed, and the identity was to provide a greater degree of certainty or opportunity of understanding of how that site would be developed, and that, again, from a community perspective and good accountability, that the intention was for that site to be developed for the purpose that it is being developed, ensure that it wasn't effectively underutilised for another use.
Thank you. The other question is, on the submissions, there was 47 submitters that was not properly made, and to me that's a concern that, you know, is there a reason, I mean, explaining the process of our submitters and getting that message across, can you just explain why those 47 submitters were not properly made?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. Yeah, so again, under the Planning Act, it's almost unfortunate terminology as it refers to them as not properly made submissions, but there's a requirement to make a submission in a particular way, and that was within the notification period itself. So some of those submissions might be received either before or after, or may not provide details of an address or information of that nature that renders them to be not properly made. However, all of those submissions are considered by officers exactly as they would be if they had been submitted during the course, but those people wouldn't be afforded rights in the Planning Environment Court if they wished or they disagreed with the decision. So in that context, I know our council's website does have information to explain how that works, and that is available to people to view. But it is a difficult matter because it's quite a prescriptive thing. But generally speaking, yes, we would want to encourage people and the public notification, the adverts themselves, or provide the information of when a submission has to be made and the form it has to be made in.
Thank you. And maybe a question for Mr. Sturgis. So, obviously, as part of this recommendation, the developer is to undertake the Mooloolaba Southern Parklands Stage 3 of the Mooloolaba Foreshore Revitalisation Project. How confident are we as a council for this developer to contribute and to actually develop the site as per our vision? Because we were very, when we went out to the public, we went out for public consultation, we heard from the community, and obviously the background that we received, it really drove the design of that master plan for that foreshore work. So the confidence for us to work with the developer to actually put on site what we actually see, because if they're paying for it, how much a say will they have in the project?
So through the chair, thank you for the question, councillor. One of the advantageous things with this proposal is that the developer has, in this case, used the same designer that council has been using for the remainder of the foreshore work. So with the master plan in place and with the work that's already done and the stage that design's at, which is quite advanced, we know that the design meets the requirements. It's generally in alignment with the master plan and brings down from even the Northern Parklands the same look and feel and the elements that would have been designed in had council been designing it. So we are confident that the design that's been proposed, it really does suit the foreshore.
Thank you. And also thank you. In the notes, I asked a question in our information session about public art, and I believe it specifically talks about not public art in the foreshore area, but the public art needs to be delivered on the actual footprint of the development site. Is that correct?
Yes, that's how the intention is to be done, and the process for how they go about effectively designing and agreeing the art is all set out within the condition itself, although that could be varied in another way if it was considered that there was a better way to do it in the future, or that the foreshore presented a greater opportunity. That's something that we could look to amend if we needed to.
Thank you. May I just speak to it, Madam Chair? Councillors, height is one of those issues on the coast here is extremely sensitive for our community. And it takes me back 50 years for when Westway Towers was constructed in Caloundra at 16 stories on the highest point in Caloundra. That building still stands there today. But this area along the Mooloolaba foreshore has been identified for increased height. Part of the officer's recommendation obviously speaks importantly about the lack of branded hotels we have on the Sunshine Coast. Less than 3% of our local hotels can be actually identified as a branded 4 to 5 star hotel. We have refreshed our regional economic development strategy, and one of those, part of the refresh was actually to really go hard as part of a hotel investment strategy for the Sunshine Coast. And to build our economic prosperity for tourism, for higher valued in regards to visitation numbers on the Sunshine Coast here, branded hotels are a necessity. I've been fully supportive of endorsing the TLPI, which was all around obviously offering slightly increased height for developers, but also a reduction in parking ratios. And I know to our community, parking ratios are extremely, extremely sensitive, but it's around how we can continue to recommend and advise our community to look at other forms of transport, active transport, public transport, using obviously transport providers. I stand here today, I am supporting Officer the officer's recommendation. I thank you for the questions answered. I'm sure my fellow colleagues will have quite a few other questions, so I'll leave it there, Deputy Mayor, and allow my councillors to ask questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Landsberg. Councillor Dixon.
Yeah, good morning, and to you, Deputy Mayor. I've been involved with this site for, I'm going to say, at least 10 years now, and I've seen many iterations and discussions. I've been in tours with councillors in Brisbane to look at other developments to see what we could produce here as an outcome in Mooloolaba. And I think there's an expectation now that this site will be developed. I think the question we get often is, well, when's it going to happen? Because there's been a lot of public discussion. And it's not new, these discussions around a contribution for the Mooloolaba foreshore works. This is not new. This is not something that has just come up with the latest proposal and been decided in an infrastructure agreement. The developer has been talking to council about this for a number of years. So there's no surprises for me at all when I read the report. But I think we need to have a good hard look at ourselves, because we've just done the planning scheme engagement for the region, and I've been to a few of those community pop-ups and forums with the community. And, you know, this is really where the rubber hits the road. The community are telling us in some pockets that they don't want to see a significant change in their local area. And this is where you've got people in 1 and 2 and 3 storey buildings having 6 and 8 next door. And when I go through these discussions and you play chess in your own mind, well, something needs to give. You can't just say no to everything without a solution. And what's that solution look like? Well, in my mind, it's about having development in areas that already sustain development. And Mooloolaba is a key tourism area. Let's not hide from the fact that Mooloolaba for decades has been the evolving face of economic development and hotel prosperity for the region. Quite clearly, that's what it is. And in fact, not only has the industry and the local development industry told us that, but we've backed that by spending a significant amount of money on the foreshore. In fact, those works are still happening there now. So if you think about what the future looks like, we have the opportunity to continue with some greenfield development and knock down trees in the hinterland, or we need to consolidate. And for me, it's a bit of a balance. I don't think you can prescribe and subscribe to every single argument there. It's about doing the right thing in the right area. So if I go back here right now and I look at some of the fantastic concepts and shadowing models that have been shown in the report, you can actually see that this fits in with the local area. This is part of the character of Mooloolaba. I mean, residents aren't going to expect that you're going to have a 4 or 6 storey building like this in Mooloolaba. In fact, this is the type of development we've been trying to get. Now, if you go back to the TLPI for the hotel incentive strategy, and I realise the government have taken the site out, but this is one of the key decisions council made. It wanted to see a 5-star hotel on this site, on this locality. That's council's adopted position. That hasn't changed. So that ticks off on that. Whether you like the Olympics or not, it's coming. And we've heard again and again and again that Queensland, southeast Queensland, will not have enough accommodation spaces. So unless we start to do something about that, those spaces aren't going to grow up on their own. The council needs to play a role in that. In terms of local expectation, I've had 0 submissions from Division 6. I've not spoken to one elected voter, one resident in one constituent at all, Deputy Mayor, in Division 6 that's raised this issue. In fact, what I keep hearing from people is, why hasn't the development happened? It's been approved. Why hasn't it happened? There's been community engagement. Why is it not built? Why does Mooloolaba continue to suffer from roadwork, construction activity? Just get on, get the job done, and get out of Mooloolaba and leave it alone. Not that money is a decision for us to reflect in a planning frame of view, but today is an interesting one. We've just gone through a budget, and we know that we don't have the council funds to be spending money in Mooloolaba. And in fact, I wouldn't vote to spend more money at Mooloolaba because I'd like to see money spent elsewhere in the region. This is an active development proposal that looks to develop and pay for a significant council project that is unfunded. We've heard today that we're looking at about $9 million for the project. How are we going to find that money? Can anyone in the room answer that today? Because I don't support another significant rate rise to be paying for more works at Mooloolaba. And if we can get the development industry to dip in and pay for what they should be doing for frontage works, then why not? And I think this is the exact scenario that we should be encouraging developers to be looking at. We do hear that precedent is a big thing. I hear it all the time. I've heard it for nearly 20 years in local government. Be careful of precedent. And it is real. There will be colleagues here today that say, be careful of the precedent you set. Giving an extra 2 stories on this building means that every other developer is going to expect the same thing. And that's probably a fair argument if you're going to the P&E court, because courts will look at those things. And that's a fair argument. But for me, I try and look at everything on its own individual merit, and I may need an extension.
Yes, Councillor Dixon, would you like an extension? Moved by Councillor Johnson, seconded by Councillor Bunnag. All those in favour? It's carried unanimously.
Thank you very much. I'm getting smarter. I saw the red writing there on the screen. I do talk about precedent, but let's be fair. This is a very individual and significant case. How often do we have developers coming to the Sunshine Coast saying, we will build in the key tourism corridor, we will provide you with $9 million of public work that the local council cannot afford. We are working towards 5-star accommodations for the 2032 Olympic Games. If you can find me another developer and development site that can bring up the exact credentials to mirror this, then let's have a fair go. But this really needs to be assessed on its own merits. And that's exactly what our decision-making role is here today. It's to assess this development on its own individual merits. And on balance, Deputy Mayor, this is a proposal that I can support. There will be a number of my colleagues here today that can run an argument either way. We can run an argument against the development, we can run it for it. In fact, I can do both right now. But if this goes to court, and the court assess the development application, I believe they're going to see that it's reasonable, it's relevant, it's appropriate, it's well cited, and that you wouldn't be putting this development elsewhere. They're not going to find the land. In fact, our planning scheme is so specific that it talks about Mooloolaba accommodating this exact type of development. Your hotel incentive TLPI talked about this exact site, this exact type of development right here in Mooloolaba. So for me, as much as I would love to say, let's adhere to the planning scheme, let's keep the height limits low, reduce development in the region, I've got to be a realist. This is the application, this is the site, this is exactly what you want to see in the place that you want to see it. So for those reasons that I've talked on today, I will be supporting this development. And in fact, I'm going to make a comment here to the organisation. This was a very balanced report. This didn't just read as a DA report. This was extremely balanced. This was sympathetic to the viability of the region, the Olympics, business, local residents, industry. In fact, the way it was presented, it put me on the fence where I could have gone either way with the development. And I think it was a very balanced report. So locals can look and reflect and see that council has made the best decision in totality for the region. And for that, I will support the development application today.
Thank you, Councillor Dixon. Councillor Johnston.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. To you, Phil, I've only had one item of correspondence. It was a text that was sent to me, someone that I know that was asking a question about the beach and the shadow. And could you explain to us in more detail about what the normal situation just throughout the year would be as far as shadows on the beach? And does it at any time affect the flagged areas? And if so, by how much and when?
Yeah, no, through the Chair. So we've undertaken a comprehensive assessment of the shadows throughout the year, and the images showed there were the ones with the most significant impact. As we know, the shadows change during the course of the year. In terms of we know that the flags and things will move at times. There's not a distinct thing, but as you saw from there, that would not have it would not impact on the area between the flags where it would normally usually be set up within that beach area. And we are only seeing those marginal increases of shadow. That one there, I think, was shown as is December at 4 o'clock. So effectively, at the time of year where that's significantly, where the placement of the sun makes the biggest impact. There is another diagram that shows in October a longer shadow, and it's a more diagonal line that goes more towards where the volleyball courts and things are. However, that was already in shadow by the approval, and it is only effectively lengthened to an extent by the proposal.
Right. I think what the average person is concerned about is that if you go to other local authorities where buildings have been allowed to be built, and the reports have said it's not going to shadow on the beach and all this sort of thing, well, in actual fact, that's not true. You find that there's significant shadowing of the beach. So you're entirely confident that the examples that you've shown are correct as a worst case scenario?
Yes, through the chair, that's correct. And in addition, I would say that the diagrams that we showed also didn't show shadowing from existing other buildings as well. So even the surf club itself would cast a shadow on the beach at that time of year, obviously much lower building. But yes, that is the case.
Yeah, thank you very much. And it's, I'll just make a comment, and that is that although the trees don't cover a larger shadowed area, if you have a look on the shadowing, the trees shadow nearly as far out as the building does. So, and just the extra bit of height on the building wouldn't make that much difference to the shadow. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. And in addition to our own report, the applicant has also produced images and an expert witness to the extent to say the same outcome.
Right, thank you. And in addition to what Councillor Dixon was saying, I'd also like to compliment the team on the report. I think it's well balanced, it's sensible, and it's covered all of the aspects. So, and it's just happens to be, it's not the primary reason it got approved, but it happens to be that it's to our financial advantage as a council, and the developer or the proposed developer should be complimented for doing that, particularly as it goes beyond what they previously had approved. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnston. Councillor Bunnag.
Good morning. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Through you, I've just got a question to start with, if I could please, to Mr. Joyce. In the detailed assessment report, there's a section around the artificial lighting plan relating to marine turtles. And it talks about the fact that as part of the conditioning of this approval for condition 62, it requires external lighting to minimise impacts on surrounding environments, and the applicant intends to address this condition through submission of the artificial light management plan prior to commencement of construction. Now, note in the conditions that lighting plan is not conditioned, but can you just share with me the details around how that lighting plan will actually be assessed and worked through council prior to construction commencing?
Sorry, yeah, through the chair. There's a number of measures that the applicant has put forward that seek collectively to minimise the impacts of those, and the intention, whilst also again noting that this area is not necessarily a significant sensitive area because of the extent of development that is already there, and the additional impacts of this proposal is only those 2 floors. There is a real negligible additional impact in the context of that issue. However, the intention is that the applicant produce the report and effectively implement the recommendations of it in order to ensure that those aspects can be minimised throughout the lifetime of, and that will be in terms of the types of lighting that they use, how they shield the light. And in addition to that, there are also Australian standards and requirements in place to deal with measurement and how you deal with artificial lighting.
Thank you, Mr. Joyce. Through you, Deputy Mayor, I also just have a question to Mr. Rundle around the TLPI, and noting that Mr. Joyce can't probably answer that. Councillor Landsberg made reference to the fact that Mooloolaba and this site formed part of the TLPI that was approved by this council. In the assessment report, it notes that the parking ratio that is proposed under this preliminary approval and this proposal far exceeds what was actually afforded under the TLPI. Could you just share some information about that, please?
Through you, Deputy Mayor. Yes, that's right. So the TLPI, when it was developed, it proposed a reduced rate for parking for hotels that were captured by the TLPI at a rate of 1 per 3 hotel rooms, which is less than the current planning scheme. This application relates to a change of an earlier development approval, which was considered prior to that TLPI being developed. So it actually proposed a higher rate than what the TLPI ended up granting for those projects. So our assessment of the parking is that the applicant hasn't proposed to drop all the parking rates down to the TLPI. They're actually maintaining, I think it's about the 1 per 2 rather than the 1 per 3. So the extra 50 rooming units that are proposed with this hotel application, there'll be 28 parking bays added to the conditions to deal with those 50 rooms. So we're still looking at rates well above the 1 per 3, sorry. Yep.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I might speak to it now, and just Mr. Rundle, the ratio will end up being 1 to 1.66 rooms, which is quite an advantageous outcome compared to the TLPI. So I'll speak to the motion now, and I will be supporting this today. And I've come at this from a relatively pragmatic bent, in the sense that we're making a decision today not to decide whether or not we have high-rise accommodation in Mooloolaba on this site. That is, as Councillor Dixon has said, that's a discussion that's well and truly finished in the 90s. Realistically, there is a existing approval for a 14-storey building. This takes it to 16 storeys. But when I think about the real question today, it's, do we want a 5-star accommodation, hotel and resort at this site in Mooloolaba? And when I looked at the assessment report, which was very well done, as other councillors have noted, this isn't just about increasing the number of rooms that are in the accommodation, but it's also about doing finishing touches that actually make this a truly 5-star resort outcome, which is, I think, really important in our climate at the moment. So it's about doing things like achieving appropriate floor-to-ceiling heights, consistent with contemporary expectations for a high-quality hotel. It also is about making sure that the ground level is adjusted in line with the seawall. So this is not just about a height grab, it's actually about making sure that this is fit for purpose. And when I look at some of the sight lines and some of the building mass that has been generated through the 3D modelling, what struck me is the fact, as I said earlier, we're not deciding whether to put a high-rise building here. It already exists. It will already exist whether we approve this modification today or not. And it certainly is consistent with the higher order intent for Mooloolaba that has been envisaged in our planning scheme. And Mooloolaba's role, according to our planning scheme, is as the key coastal tourism destination requiring development to deliver high-quality, contemporary, subtropical design, protect important landscape elements, and contribute positively to streetscape and public realm. And this, from my perspective, does all of those things and more. What I will say in regards to concerns that people in the community will raise, no doubt people will say that council's turning the Sunshine Coast into the Gold Coast. Well, that's just nonsense. If you look at what is proposed in terms of height of this building, 64 metres, the tallest building on the Gold Coast is 322 metres. And if you go through the list that's been provided in additional information around the tallest buildings in Mooloolaba and across the rest of the Sunshine Coast, it doesn't even sit in the same hemisphere. The height that we have on the Sunshine Coast in comparison to our southern neighbours. So what this is doing and achieving in Mooloolaba is exactly what is intended in our planning scheme, turning it and continuing to turn it into a very, very, I think, attractive place for people to come and visit. It's nice to see that Mooloolaba is finally doing some heavy lifting in terms of five-star resorts. We've had the Novotel up at Division 8, we've had the Hyatt in Division 8. It's good to see Mooloolaba coming along on the journey. But ultimately, even putting aside the benefits of, the public benefits of the streetscape and foreshore work, I constantly hear from residents who complain to me about things like Airbnb and transitory accommodation in our residential areas where it shouldn't be. And I say to those people, if you want to see less Airbnbs in suburban streets, we need to see more hotels in places where it should be sited. And that's what this decision for me today has been about. I think the team has done a wonderful job in framing this as a package. As I said, I approached it from a pragmatic lens. It's not just about the Olympics, but what do we want the Sunshine Coast to look like in 30 years? And I think when we look at Mooloolaba and what this building will offer and what this resort will offer, I think it aligns with what the Sunshine Coast wants to see in the future. So I'll be supporting this today, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Barnag. Councillor Burns.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just a couple of questions to start, please. Firstly, Mr Joyce, can you just clarify, through this development application, the infrastructure charges still remain for the developer to contribute to council?
Through the chair, yes, that's correct.
So full infrastructure charges. Great. Second question, it may be for Mr Sturgis. I just note when we're on page, I think it's 14 of the agenda, point 5, it just says that provision of a refundable financial contribution of $500,000 towards council's design and construction of a playground. And it says the financial contribution is refundable in the event that council does not commence construction of the playground within 2 years of payment. Just wondering, what level of confidence are you able to provide us some direction on the capacity and the ability for council to deliver or commence the delivery of the playground, which the $500,000 is a contribution towards?
Through the chair, thank you. So, firstly, what I would say is the current stage of construction that council's building, the central meeting place, has land on the northern periphery towards the northern parklands for a playground to be sited, which is also in accordance with the master plan. So we know that there's space, and there will be space once the project that we have in construction is complete for that playground to be built. So that's that taken out of the equation. I think there is the 2-year period, but the 2-year period is probably more than that. We can't say exactly how long, but that's triggered from when the applicant lodges their above groundworks approval or is granted that. So it's likely that it is actually longer than 2 years. So we've got a degree of confidence and comfort that a playground can be provisioned in a location where there's space, and that there's significant time for us to do that within the 2 years, plus some through a number of budget process cycles and design time. So we're confident.
Thanks, Mr Sturgis. And no doubt there's been feedback around the playground and the play space in that Mooloolaba Parklands area broadly, and so it's a really important piece of infrastructure. So thanks for the clarification. I might just speak now to the proposal. A number of months ago, I went to check the surf at Curramundi, as is a common occurrence, and I was chatting to a local resident, and we were talking about things around as the coast progresses and develops, and we actually spoke about this, and it was as this application was out for public consultation. And in the discussion, this resident said to me, it just makes sense to me. This area of Mooloolaba is already developed. So to Councillor Dixon's point, it was articulated to me as clearly as that by one of the residents in Division 3. And I thought it was quite instructional. When we add into the fact that we are not foregoing infrastructure charges, we will receive the full infrastructure charges that a developer would be required to pay council, which go into contributing to other public space, public realm upgrades through LGIP and things like that. Plus potential $9.5 million worth of investment from the developer on top of the standard infrastructure charges. That is a significant benefit and bonus to this community. This is not the developer buying council off. This is the developer recognising that the contribution they provide into public space that will only benefit local businesses at Mooloolaba who continually say it's been a battle and a struggle. It will contribute to the public realm where people love to go to this beach. This is a world-class beach. It's been voted as, you know, the best beach going. I probably disagree personally, but I reckon Curra's is up there. But this beach is well loved. We know it's a tourism hotspot. We know it's an event hotspot. This is a place where the Mooloolaba Try, all the rest of it, the marathon comes through there. There at the, you know, the midnight fireworks has sometimes been held there. This area, though, is a busy, very well-loved area, and it makes sense for the Sunshine Coast to have a world-class outcome in an area that is so heavily touristed. So from all of those perspectives, this is a bonus and a benefit for the region. I appreciate and 100% understand people's concerns about being the Gold Coast or becoming the Gold Coast, and I think as Councillor Bunag has clearly articulated, it's just, we cannot be further from the Gold Coast if we tried, which I'm really proud of. I don't know anyone in this chamber who longs to be like the Gold Coast. That is not who we are. We're the sunny coast. And we're a darn sight better than the Gold Coast. We are our own people and we are forming and shaping our own future. This is an example of it. We can have high-class, world-leading, five-star hotel accommodation direct in a regional activity zone of Mooloolaba that will actually blend in and actually suit the architectural merits of our region, will actually provide uplift and design into that space that is actually attractive and will bring significant economic uplift, not just to places of Mooloolaba, but across the region. This actually will steal some of that top traffic that likes to go up the road to Noosa and instead bring it down to the sunny coast where it should belong. This is a good place to come and holiday, and if you're an international visitor, I say come and stay here. So I really applaud the officers in their tireless work. They've been really meticulous and detailed in actually responding to this. I note that even through this application for uplift, they've actually negotiated with the developers to actually reduce the height from what was actually proposed in this application initially. So this is not just a carte blanche, come on, let's go build high-rise. This is not the case. It's on a case-by-case basis. It's a well-located area. It delivers what we need as a region. It actually recognises the value of tourism to our economy. It actually provides a way for us to be celebrated on the international stage in 2032 and beyond. This is in an area that is already developed, and it will actually align with all the broader plans that we have for this region. So I do support it, and I'm really grateful for the staff to bring that to us. And I look forward to seeing a great outcome, just as Avani has been on Brisbane Road in Mooloolaba already. People are really loving that Avani hotel space. It has brought something to the part of Mooloolaba that did not exist before, and this will see Avani and it will raise it. And I say that sort of competition will only be good for the traders along Mooloolaba. Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Burns. Councillor Law.
Thank you. Through you, Deputy Mayor, a question if I may. In relation to the infrastructure agreement, you've said that it's a voluntary agreement the developer has entered into and put before us today. Is this common to have an infrastructure agreement like this? So, for example, do these come through not associated with impact development in this way? Do we see a lot of these, say, over the last 5 years?
Thanks for the question through the chair. It's not uncommon, but it's also not that frequent. The planning framework effectively enables councils or local governments to enter into agreements to secure planning benefit effectively above and beyond what might be achievable for a reasonable relevant condition, or something that might go above and beyond the trunk requirements or the impacts associated with the development just by itself. So in this context here, what they are delivering is obviously above and beyond what we could reasonably expect to condition upon them for the scale and nature of the development itself. In terms of the number, we have recently, since my time, I think this is the third infrastructure agreement that council's entered into, and we could enter into for code or impact or any application. Effectively, it enables council to get into a legally binding agreement for the delivery of an aspect of the development or a potential benefit that that can't be resolved through a planning condition.
Okay. Thank you very much. So my next question from that is, do you anticipate a flood of agreements like this coming to us so a developer can gain those type of advantages?
Through the chair, obviously in some ways I can't answer the question, but in a hypothetical sense that we would see that obviously people will see that there is a precedent, well, there's not a precedent, but that this has been approved, but on its own merit. So in the context of this, you would look at the impact of the development itself is not considered to be an unacceptable impact. And in some ways, the reason that was through an infrastructure agreement in this context because the works themselves weren't accessible. So that because effectively that they are landscaping type development outcomes within an area that supports that development. So within that foreshore area to do that kind of work is not actually accessible. So this provided the mechanism for us to tie in those to this approval. So we would look at everything on its own merit and in proportion and scale to the extent of the development. It is also not reasonable for council to seek to achieve benefits above and beyond what is reasonable in order to achieve a planning outcome. First and foremost, as the report sets out, officers consider that this decision stacks up in the sense that there is not an unacceptable impact for the additional height.
Okay. Great. Thank you very much for that. Appreciate it. And another question around the proposed timing of the public realm works in relation to the hotel. And will it, in the report it talks about sub-stages and then, so 1 and 2 sub-stages and a 3rd stage. I guess for simplicity, which is something I like, will the public realm work be completed during, before or prior to the opening of the hotel?
So I can clarify that all 3 stages will be completed prior to the opening of the hotel.
Right. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And to speak to the motion, if I may, Deputy Mayor, it will be very brief because of the comments we've heard already. There is really nothing more to add. I don't want to repeat things that we've heard, but I will be supporting this today. Thank you.
Thank you. No further speakers. Councillor Landsberg, would you like to close?
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. And it's promising when you move an officer's recommendation and then hear the comments around the chamber, where hopefully we'll end up in a few moments' time. Just for the public's information out there, Aria Property Group, it's not their first rodeo. This is a very well experienced developer. They have delivered, and just last year they were awarded the best development in Australia for a property in Brisbane. They have had long-term involvement on the Sunshine Coast, so I'm sure that we will see an outstanding building delivered here in Mooloolaba. Hearing the comments around the chamber, and it was really, obviously, what really struck us in regards to the issues for our community is the visual amenity. And I really want to commend our staff around the comments that they made during this proposal. And in regards to the height that we're talking about, it does not compromise the strategic views of this property in regards to from other areas of the region. The comments with the Gold Coast, it does strike home really hard to me, and I've made this comment in the chamber before. You superimpose the skyline of Surfers Paradise and Gold Coast on the Mooloolaba foreshore skyline, we are not even in the ballpark. But we are very mindful of how this coast continues to develop. But we've also got to be mindful of the cost of delivering this type of development at a scale that we are actually supporting as part of our REDs. And you don't see an international airport invest $170 million on a terminal upgrade, and you don't follow up with that with providing support for branded hotels, which was one of the key recommendations that the Sunshine Coast Airport want to see delivered here on the Sunshine Coast. Our nighttime economy, and Councillor Tim made a comment around Avani. Yes, I did attend the opening of that hotel development, and it was just so wonderful to see the activation of that site up there at Sully's, the people enjoying that activation in Mooloolaba. And another comment just on the regards to, I'll make a comment in regards to height, and I'm pretty sure I can share this in regards to our planners, but in the draft for our planning scheme, we are already accommodating a couple of extra floors if a property is going to be delivered for social and affordable housing. So these are adjustments that we have to make. And this adjustment and this, obviously, other change to this development application here today, I'm fully supportive. It's going to be a wonderful outcome for our community, and we look forward to further branded hotels on the Sunshine Coast being delivered. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Landsberg. I'll now put the officer's recommendation and the motion to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Mr Joyce and team. We'll ask Madam Mayor and Councillor Natoli to rejoin us in the chamber. I didn't ask for a break. Let's do that. Okay. I didn't touch that. That's okay. Thank you. Just wait for Madam Mayor.
It's a separate one.
Good morning. Thank you all. Returning to the chair. Thanks for keeping it warm for me, Councillor Suarez. Next up, we move to item 8.2, the May Financial Performance Report, and we have Ms Dunbar here to present.
Good morning. Good morning, Madam Mayor, councillors and members of the executive team. I'm here to present Council's Financial Performance Report for May 2026. As at 31st of May, Council's operating result is a surplus of $35.2 million, which is $18.5 million above the current year-to-date budget. This reflects operating revenue $4.5 million higher than budget and total operating expenses $14 million lower. The major revenue variances include interest received, $1.9 million above budget, other revenue $2.3 million above budget, with the major contributor being revegetation offsets of $987,000, and internal quarry sales are down on budget by $1.3 million. Year-to-date operating expenditure is $14 million below year-to-date budget, with key variances including employee costs $3.2 million below budget, core materials and services $9.5 million below budget, with contributing factors noted on the slide, levy programs expenditure $1.7 million below year-to-date budget, and loss on disposal continues to be above budget relating to land parcels written off following reclassification as road reserves. The total capital works program has progressed 66.5%, with $177.7 million spent year to date. The core capital works program accounts for $126.2 million of this expenditure. As at the 31st of May, Council's cash balance, excluding trust funds, is $239.1 million, comprising $81.2 million for unrestricted cash and $157.9 million for restricted. Council's total debt at the 31st of May is $413 million. Council currently holds 10 investments totalling $110 million, achieving a weighted average return of 4.91%. The 25-26 savings initiatives have been achieved, and the targeted vacancy rate remains on track to be achieved by the 30th of June 2026. This report also includes a revised year-end operating forecast. This year-end forecast includes estimates and assumptions, with the final year-end result to be confirmed following completion of our year-end processes. Current risks are outlined in the report and summarised on the slide, and the recommendation today that Council receive and note the report titled May 2026 Financial Performance Report.
Thank you. Councillors, someone to move the motion for the item. Councillor Broderick, seconded Councillor Hungerford. Councillor Broderick.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, team, for bringing this to us, rising to move this motion this morning. But before I do, I just might have questions, if that's okay. Not to put you on the spot, I might ask Mr Whittaker to come and answer this one. He might be best for it. The blaring obvious one there is that given that we're in May and we've got 66.5% delivery of our capital works program, are we confident that those projects that we've got on that program are still going to be delivered and that projects aren't going to be cancelled as we moved into the new financial year?
Through you, Madam Mayor, and thanks for the question, Councillor. There's no projects that's been deferred or delayed as part of a financial situation. We have experienced some difficulty in progressing some of the projects as quickly as we would have thought, which is resulting in that number, and weather is part of that issue. We've had a significant amount of rain that's delayed a lot of the construction activities, but there's been no projects that have been postponed or deferred.
Right, thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Scott, for bringing that. Our report shows a positive operating position ahead of budget alongside steady delivery of our capital works program, as Scott's just explained, and reinforced our continued focus on our long-term sustainability just as we discussed at length only a couple of weeks ago. So it shows that we're managing our finances very carefully, and our year-to-date operating result is currently $35.2 million ahead of budget. But it's really important to note that this is still a year-to-date result, and our final position will not be confirmed until the end-of-year processes are complete, until we get to the end of that capital works program being delivered and reconciled. So our revenue performance is mixed across our services. We've got interest income tracking better than expected, which is always nice, and some other revenue performing better than expected, as we've seen in sports and community venues, and with our lease revenue and revegetation offsets actually being received prior to when we had originally budgeted for, so they're those numbers that you're seeing. Our operating expenses are also below budget across several service areas, including some maintenance program, as we've said, affected by weather. And we know some expenditure can increase in the final month of the year. So again, monitoring that closely, waiting for those final figures to come in. Overall, a positive year-to-date result, while still recognising close attention to our end-of-year risks, timing differences and budget assumptions that we've also been through in depth recently. I commend this report to Council and leave it for my fellow colleagues to ask questions. Thanks, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Broderick. Councillor Johnston.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've got a couple of questions. The QRA funding from Cyclone Alfred on page 12, there seems to be an inordinate, Scott might be able to answer this, there seems to have been an inordinate length of time since that occurred to us actually getting some of these projects completed. How confident are you that they're going to be done very soon? Have they all been approved? And how much are we expecting?
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor. Thanks for the question, Councillor. Some of these projects are very difficult to progress quickly. Majority of those are geotech sites, so there may be some slips or landslides or those sort of things that take a lot of geotechnical investigations and detailed design work to progress them. I know that may look and feel as though it's taking a long period of time, but the investigations take significant for those sites. On all the other sites, they're complete, in my understanding, and the section at First Bay at Coolum was opened about 2 weeks ago. I think the works were finalised.
Yeah. Thanks, Mr Whittaker. There's a couple in my division which people are agitating about, but I've got the answer now. I'd just like to make a comment in relation to and ask a question in relation to Council's debt. it's interesting that the average, the weighted average of interest for our debt is only 2.9%, and that's exceptional, and it's because of a decision made by the previous council in relation to wrapping up some loans when the interest rate was much lower than they were actually originally borrowed at. So now it says that the mature between 5 and 16 years. The ones that are very short maturity rate term, do you got any idea what they are?
So through the chair, I will have to take that on notice, and I can provide you with a detailed list of the loans and the maturity dates.
Right, thank you.
Councillor Suarez.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor. Sharon, I have one question just about the operating result expenses, significant variances with waste of $3.7 million. Is that related to the deferral of the Resource Recovery Centre at the Nambour landfill site?
So through the in the capital, apologies.
Yeah, page 14 of the late agenda paper, operating result expenses, the significant variances. Core materials and services was 9.5 million below budget, and waste was 3.7 of that.
Through the chair, thank you, Councillor Suarez. So that variance is actually due to the operating expenditure of waste rather than the delay in the capital program works. So the reduction in, or the underspend in expenditure is kind of threefold. The waste levy payment for the state is 1.2 million due to less tonnages. Did you want to, step in?
Scott Whittaker, our director, is going to jump in here.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll help you out here, Sharon, I think. I think it's a bit of a combination, Councillor Suarez, of how this has come about. So there's obviously been less material going to landfill, which has meant we've had less from a levy to pay the state. But also the Containers for Change and Recycling program is going through the roof, and we've had a significant uplift, which is helping with our diversion. So I actually think it's a real positive where we've got to in this program, and we're diverting more things for reuse rather than going into landfill, which is a positive, and we're seeing that in a financial state as well.
Okay, thank you. That is positive news. I'll speak. Thanks, Madam Mayor. I don't have a lot to say. Just that I really appreciate in the operating result the revenue, the revegetation offsets and the contribution that's making to our budget, and just tying that into last month's ordinary meeting where we made that deferral to the environment levy for land acquisitions for up to 3 years. And while I know we still have some money left in the kitty for purchasing of environmental land should it present itself, it is really an important strategic part of this council's decision making to continue to look for those opportunities, because it does present not only an environmental benefit but it also presents a great financial benefit. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Suarez. No other speakers. Councillor Broderick, would you like to close? No? Okay, I shall put that motion to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you. Will we stop? Yeah. We will take a break now for morning tea, and we'll return in 10 minutes. We'll go for 10 minutes. Thank you. We have a lot on the agenda today, so we'll be back in 10 minutes at 10:40. Thank you. Vandenberg to present item 8.3, which is the update and amendment of the 2025-26 contracting plan. Welcome, Mr. Vandenberg.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good morning, and through you, good morning, councillors. Item 8.3 relates to the amendment and update of the 2025-26 contracting plan. In 2018, Council resolved to adopt the strategic contracting provisions of the local government regulations. Having adopted the strategic contracting provisions, the local government regulations require that Council make and adopt a contracting plan for each financial year. The contracting plan for the 25-26 financial year was adopted at the ordinary meeting of 24 July 2025, following the adoption of Council's budget for the 25-26 financial year. The contracting plan must, amongst other things, include the contracts that Council considers will be significant. Council considers contracts greater than $5 million to be significant. Prior to entering into any significant contract, Council must make a significant contracting plan for each significant contract. These significant contracting plans must be approved by the CEO. Due to changes in timing, strategy and value, the list of significant contracts included in the 25-26 contracting plan requires amendment to align with the significant contracts that Council has or will enter into this financial year. The regulations provide that Council can, by resolution, amend a contracting plan at any time before the end of the financial year to which the plan relates. The purpose of this report is to update Council on the progress of the identified significant contracts and detail the proposed amendments to the 25-26 contracting plan. The 25-26 contracting plan identified 22 significant contracts that Council anticipated delivering during the 25-26 financial year. This is the largest number identified for a single financial year since we adopted the strategic contracting provisions. 14 of these 22 have had a procurement activity commenced or completed, 10 being completed and 4 still current. The 4 that are still current will be included in the 26-27 contracting plan. The remaining 8 had no procurement activity undertaken. Changes in timing were the reason that 7 were not undertaken. With a change in strategy, the reason the remaining 1 was not undertaken. Of the 8 that had no procurement activity undertaken, 5 will be included in the 25-26 contracting plan. So as mentioned, due to a combination of timing, strategy or contract value, a number of amendments are required to the list of significant contracts. There are 18 amendments identified. Firstly, to remove contracts from the list that will now not be entered into this financial year or which do not meet the requirements for a significant contract. There are 15 such contracts identified for removal. 9 of these will be included in the 26-27 contracting plan. And secondly, add 3 contracts which meet the requirements for a significant contract. The amendments required are provided over this and the following 2 slides. Everything identified on the screen there now is for removal, as is everything presented on that slide. The 3 items identified on the screen there now are additions to the contracting plan. The result of the proposed amendments is a list of 10 contracts presented on the screen now is the list of significant contracts that Council already has or is expected will enter into this financial year, and is the list contained in the amended 25-26 contracting plan included as Appendix A to the report. The 25-26 contracting plan will be amended in no other way than to replace the original list of 22 with the list of 10 now on the screen. The effect of this amendment is to align the list of significant contracts included in the contracting plan with, firstly, the significant contracts that Council already has or will enter into this financial year, and secondly, the significant contracting plans approved by the CEO. And that is the recommendation.
Thank you, Mr Vandenberg. Moved Councillor Johnston, seconded Councillor Natoli. Thank you. Councillor Johnston.
Madam Mayor, I appreciate the Council staff bringing this, our team bringing this to us for consideration today. I have no real questions other than nowhere in the report does it say what a significant contract is. Would you like to explain what, for the people who are in the gallery and also for the public who are on live stream, what a significant contract is described as and what type of contracts they would be? Thank you.
Through the Chair, so Council, within the contracting plan itself, it actually defines what we consider to be a significant contract. So firstly, it's a contract with a value or anticipated contract value of $5 million or more, or on the basis of risk, we consider it to be a significant contract. So if it meets either of those or both of those criteria, we consider it to be a significant contract.
Yeah. Thank you. That's understandable, and I don't think there needs further debate from my perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnston. Councillor Burns.
Thanks, Madam Mayor, through you. Thanks, Mr Vandenberg. Just one little question, if you could maybe just help clarify. This is on page 31 of the pack, or page 3 of the actual contracting plan. It just says that sound contracting principles will be followed and endorsed through all of this, and that these contracting principles are value for money, open and effective competition, the development of competitive local business and industry, environmental protection and ethical behaviour and fair dealing. I'm just wondering, are you able to, because our community do have concerns and rightly ask questions around how does council actually undertake contracting, how do we make sure that there's not sort of dodgy deals or things like that going on. The first 2 points say value for money, open and effective competition. Are you able to explain for me in the chamber what we do to ensure value for money and open and effective competition is adhered to in the principles?
Through you, Madam Mayor. I'll probably deal with the second dot point first. So open and effective competition. So obviously requesting and seeking pricing from the market, whether that be an RFQ or a public tender, is the way that we demonstrate the open and effective competition in relation to that. The value for money aspect of it, and I appreciate the focus in relation to cost that phrase brings. But I think in relation to how we assess value for money, it's really about the totality of what we are getting for the money that we're paying. And by that, I don't just necessarily mean the thing that we're procuring, but I mean, what are we getting in terms of the things that council want to deliver through their procurement spend? So obviously, when we look at value for money, it's probably the greatest representation of the things that we seek. So a contractor who can comprehensively demonstrate that they have the capability and experience to do the work. A contractor that can demonstrate that they understand what's required, that they know what's involved in delivering it, that they've priced everything within the scope, that they can do it within council's time frame, that they have the resourcing and the plant of equipment to actually do it. They have systems in place in relation to health and safety, environment and sustainability, quality. So all of those things we look for in a response, as well as delivering on our social objectives, which council has a position in relation to using our procurement spend to deliver those things. So that's local, but it's not just being a local business, it's how do you contribute to the local economy? How do you contribute to the local community? In relation to First Nations, are you a First Nations business, or do you support First Nations businesses in your supply chain? Similar with social benefit, are you a social benefit business, and how do you support social benefit in your supply chain? So all of that goes into the mix in relation to what we consider value for money, and that can't be considered in isolation to the price. So when we look at value for money, it's how much are we spending to deliver on all the things that one council is looking for in a contractor, and everything that council is trying to deliver through its procurement spend.
Thank you for that really clear and thorough response. Very helpful. No more questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Burns. Councillor Broderick.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor. And just following on from that, can you explain the difference, for those playing along at home, the difference between what we've got before us, the contract plan that we're looking at now, and our procurement policy that will later come into play? So how do those two work together?
Through the Chair. So the way they work together is that this plan obviously is a regulatory requirement that we have to identify these. This plan doesn't actually speak to the strategy in relation to each of the items that it relates to. So the way that each of these contracts included within the plan are delivered in accordance with our procurement framework. So this plan speaks about what it is we're going to deliver. The framework covers how we're actually going to deliver the contracts referred to in the plan.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. That's really clear. Thanks, Ben. And then the other question, the only last question that I've got through you, Madam Mayor, is there are 3 listed on this amendment plan that are being moved in. Can you explain why, what thresholds have they crossed in order for them to make it into this list?
Through the Chair, Councillor, in relation to all of those three, it's the $5 million threshold. The reasons they're being included is changes in timing, further considerations in relation to the contract term and the price.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Thanks, Madam Mayor.
Great, thank you. Councillor Landsberg.
Sorry, I was daydreaming there for a minute.
Welcome back.
Shouldn't say that, but I truly was.
No.
Thank you, Mr Vandenberg. Just a question, and it came up in our information session, talking about the changes or the amendments to the contracting plan. You're moving into 10-year contracts, and the challenges for that over a length of period of contract. What guidelines, I mean, because looking at the figures in here in terms of our procurement, and when you're looking at figures, you know, for obviously 2024-25, procurement spend was $545 million. Sorry, for 25-26 was $545 million, and for 24-25 was $365 million. So your in terms of procurement is one of the, in regards to the highly responsible area of council in where we spend money. So understanding the guidelines and principles around obviously extensions of contracts, but giving that surety that we can still deliver those contracts within budget, within timeframes.
Through the Chair, Councillor, the consideration to looking at longer term contracts is probably a response to a number of things. The value for money aspect is one, and whether we have the ability to drive greater value through longer term contracting. But secondly, it's probably in anticipation, and everybody's well aware of the pipeline of infrastructure works that are currently happening now and will happen over the next couple of years, in positioning council as an organisation that other parties would like to contract with. So making an attractive proposition to contract with council, and whether longer term contracting is a way for us to mitigate some of the risks in relation to contractor availability. Is it an opportunity for us to enter into longer term relationships and develop different relationships with contractors over a longer period of time, which enable us to incentivise contractors to improve and innovate and come up with different ways of delivering the services that we require, that we may not be able to incentivise under shorter term contracts. So there are a number of things that we're considering in relation to contract term, but really it's about positioning ourselves to get greater value for money and making sure that we are still an attractive player in the market in terms of being able to get contractors and suppliers, as we are going to enter into a period where that's going to become more challenging for us.
Another really good explanation, Mr Vandenberg, and no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Landsberg. Councillor Broderick, would you like to close? Oh, Johnston, I'm so sorry, I went back to the previous item. So no thanks for you not closing. Councillor Johnston, would you like to close?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm very understanding that you confused the two of us. No, I won't, thanks.
All right, okay, excellent. Councillors, I will put the matter to the vote. Those in favour? And it's carried unanimously. Thank you all. Now, don't go anywhere, Mr Vandenberg. No, just grabbing a new paper, because we move on to item 8.4, which is the 2026-27 contracting plan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And through you, item 8.4 relates to the adoption of the 26-27 contracting plan. So in 2018, Council resolved to adopt the strategic contracting provisions of local government regulations. Having adopted the strategic contracting provisions, the local government regulation requires Council make and adopt a contracting plan for each financial year. The regulation clearly prescribes what information a contracting plan must contain. That is, firstly, the types of contracts that Council proposes to make. We group these into the following categories based on spend, being engineering and works, facilities, services, waste services, fleet and plant, and ICTS. Council anticipates spending $597 million across these categories for the 26-27 financial year. The 25-26 financial year spend to the 19th of May figure that is included in the document for adoption today has been amended from the document previously provided following the identification of an error in the ICTS spend figure. The figure previously provided was 19 million. The correct figure is in fact 6 million. This impacts the total spend, reducing it from 435 million figure previously provided to 422 million. In addition to the types of contracts, the plan must also include the principles and strategies for performing the contracts. The sound contracting principles set out in the Local Government Act are the relevant principles. A policy about proposed delegations. These are as per Council's Delegation of Authority number 2, which covers procurement and contracting activities. A market assessment, which has been included as Annexure B to the contracting plan. The contracts that Council considers will be significant. This is included as Annexure A to the contracting plan, and also a policy about the making of a significant contracting plan. Importantly, a contracting plan cannot be adopted by Council before the annual budget has been adopted. The list of contracts that Council considers will be significant is a fundamental deliverable of the plan, as is the documentation of the policy for making of a significant contracting plan. The regulation does not prescribe what the policy for making a significant contracting plan must be, nor does it describe the definition of a significant contract. As such, Council is able to set its own policy and its own definition. The regulation does prescribe what information a significant contracting plan must contain, and also requires that the significant contracting plan must be approved prior to the commencement of the contract to which it relates. Council's policy for the making of a significant contracting plan is for the plan to be developed by the procurement team and relevant stakeholders prior to the endorsement by the manager of the branch seeking the contract and their director. The plan must then be approved by the CEO prior to the commencement of the contract. Council defines a significant contract as a contract having an anticipated value of 5 million or more, or having a proposed contract term greater than 10 years, or deemed significant based on risk. Contracts with a term greater than 10 years being considered significant is a new addition for this financial year. Longer term contracts may be required to help mitigate increasing costs and difficulty securing supply, as I spoke to earlier. The regulations require the contracting plan include an assessment of the relative cost and difficulty in securing supply under each type of contract. A comparison of the 25-26 assessment shows that relative cost for each contract type has remained unchanged, with each category having a medium or high cost. It's important to note that our 3 highest spend categories are the categories assessed as continuing to have high relative cost. We should expect to see a continuation of the challenging cost environment in these categories. There has been some change within the difficulty in securing supply, noting that no category has yet been assessed as high. This is highly likely to change as we approach the 2032 Brisbane Olympic and Paralympic Games. High relative cost, which we are already experiencing, combined with increasing difficulty in securing supply, will create a challenging environment for Council to procure and deliver works and services. Strategies will need to be developed and implemented in order to mitigate. Our review of the capital plan and expiring contracts over the next 18 months has identified 30 contracts which meet our definition of a significant contract. This is now the largest number of significant contracts identified since we adopted the strategic regulations. The 30 identified are now on the screen and have been grouped by spend category. As you can see, the largest number sits in engineering and works, where the majority of the works in the capital program are delivered. Of the 30 that have been identified, 17 relate to the delivery of capital projects, 7 relate to procurement activities to replace expiring service contracts, 4 relate to contracts for ICTS goods and services, 1 relates to the establishment of a supplier arrangement, and 1 relates to the establishment of a new service. 7 currently have some form of procurement activity underway. As just mentioned, the 30 significant contracts for the 26-27 financial year is the largest number identified, and as can be seen on the chart on the screen now, apart from 24-25, the number of significant contracts identified has been increasing year on year. Increasing costs obviously plays a part in this, as does, for our service and ICTS contracts, the contract term. With 7 of the identified activities for 26-27 currently underway, That leaves 23 significant tenders that Council is intending to release to market during the 26-27 financial year. So as well as careful consideration in regards to their particular strategy to ensure that we're achieving value for money, regard will also need to be had to the timing of the release to ensure that we are putting it out to market at a time when the market is in a position to respond. That is the Officer recommendation, noting the slight amendment to the 26-27 contracting plan previously presented.
Thank you, Mr Vandenberg. Councillors, a mover for this item, Councillor Hungerford, and a seconder, Councillor Landsberg. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Hungerford.
Through you, Madam Mayor. Thank you for that very detailed assessment there. I'm not going to go through all that again. Essentially, having adopted the strategic contracting provisions, the Local Government Regulation 2012 also requires us to make and adopt a contracting plan each financial year. To go over that again, significant contracts are contracts that have an anticipated value of $5 million or more, like the previous item, have a proposed contract term of greater than 10 years, or are deemed significant contracts following assessment under the procurement profiling matrix and risk assessment calculator. That includes assessment of the market relating to the contract itself. So basically, the regulation requires Council to make a significant contracting plan for each significant contract before the contract starts. And that was over before, so this is an annual requirement under the Act, and this is business as usual, and I commend it to Council.
Thank you, Councillor Hungerford. No other... Oh, Councillor Broderick, as a last-minute button press. Councillor Broderick.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor. Just a couple of questions, because we've spoken about the changes and what deems a contract significant. And the line that we've got in there, it's deemed significant contracts on the basis of risk. So can you just explain how that risk is assessed and then what we're doing to mitigate those risks, given that some of these contracts may be looking at 10 years now?
Through the chair. So look, it's really a risk assessment in relation to a number of things. The complexity of the project itself that we're seeking to deliver, our anticipated cost, and also the market and the timing in relation to when it will be released. So the combination of those factors, if we consider that it will be challenging, risky, we may have to adopt different strategies in relation to it, then we'll identify it as a significant contract, which will enable the significant contracting plan to be put in place and follow that pathway.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Broderick. Councillor Landsberg.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr Vandenberg, just to touch on obviously the impressive numbers of our contracts that are going to go to market, but touching on, do you see the ability for us to deliver that local spend, because we do have a percentage that is to be spent locally? Will that become a challenge for us to meet those targets in the future?
Through the chair, potentially, Councillor. At the moment, we're still holding over 70%. I think we're at 72% for our local spend. So I think the challenge in relation to our public tenders, and all of these are of the value where they're going to be public tender, is obviously we can't force locals to respond. We can't force anybody to respond, but that's why I sort of spoke earlier about how do we position Council as an attractive organisation to work for. So considerations in relation to how we present things to the market, the timing we present things to the market, what latitude we allow contractors in relation to being innovative, delivering things in a different way. Does Council need to consider differently its risk appetite? So all of those things play into that consideration. So as to whether or not we will continue to seek and receive responses from locals, I mean, obviously our process provides a preference for locals, and there's no intention to remove that. So yeah, locals responding competitively with attractive offers to Council receive a very good chance of being awarded contracts.
Thank you. That was an excellent response in regards to our procurement for tenders and contracts, keeping that circular economy here on the Sunshine Coast and supporting local business. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Landsberg. Councillor Broderick.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor. Just following on from that, Ben, have we been engaging and spoken with our local suppliers and contractors in relation to how we can best help facilitate that, so that, you know, we are getting them on board, that we are presenting them with a good offering and making it easy for them to do that?
Through the chair, not individually, we have. We've been conducting our supply briefings and whatnot to give the market visibility around what's coming up. It is certainly within our plans to start engaging more heavily with our locals as we approach the Olympics, really to get an idea of where they see themselves in the next couple of years. Are they going to be contractors who do start chasing the bigger infrastructure stuff, the Olympic stuff? Because it isn't going to be for everybody, but it's going to be about us to getting that market awareness in relation to what is our local market actually doing, and that, as I said before, will enable us to respond to how we start to position ourselves in that space as well. But we haven't started engaging directly, but it is certainly something that is in our plans to do, so that we have that awareness of what challenges we've got coming towards us.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Broderick. Okay, no other questions. Councillor Hungerford, would you like to close? No? Okay, thank you, councillors. I'll now put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? And the motion is carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Vandenberg. Thanks for your answers to all of those questions. Fantastic. We move on to item 8.5, the application of National Competition Policy, and we welcome Mr. Crock to present the item. Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So, councillors, this is a matter you consider every year, and it's the application of National Competition Policy. So, in this presentation, we'll do a quick overview of the regime, look at the business activity classification and which reforms get applied. Also have a look at the smaller business activities where discretion applies, and we're suggesting national competition policy not be used, and also the activities that we've excluded. So the competitive neutrality principle is basically around making sure that any advantage or disadvantage of government ownership is removed, so that you're competing on a level playing field with the private sector. In doing that, we remove those advantages, disadvantages. This promotes efficient allocation of resources and minimises any market distortion. If any advantages or disadvantages can't be taken out, then we have to include those in when we set the required revenue for the business activity. So in its simplest form, the NCP requires us to consider 3 questions. Are we having a business activity? Do we sell goods and services? If yes, then NCP applies. If no, then it doesn't. Then we look at the expenditure level of the business. If it's over 9.7 million per annum, that makes it a significant business activity, and there's different reforms that apply. Or if it's over 340,000, but under 9.7 million, then it's a prescribed business activity, and that's a simplified regime applies. So each year you decide by resolution whether you're going to apply or how you're going to apply NCP. And that looks at the competitive neutrality principle, the pricing provisions, financial statement disclosures, and having a complaints process. So this year, we identified the holiday parks has exceeded that threshold. So now it's a significant business activity. And the legislation requires us to do a public benefit assessment. And that's basically looking at will the benefit of applying reforms in terms of service, quality and price outweigh the costs. So we've done that for the holiday parks, and we've looked at whether we should apply full cost pricing, commercialisation or corporatisation. So what we got some consultants on board to do this process for us, They developed a report looking at the business operation and how it's currently governed. The base case assessment is comparing it to what's happening now, and that's pretty, through the Code of Competitive Conduct, we've been applying full cost pricing, so there's no change to pricing required. And introducing commercialisation or corporatisation would introduce extra costs, which would drive up prices. So the recommendation is to apply full cost pricing. Now we're looking at prescribed business activities, so they're the smaller ones that with expenditure over 340,000, but less than the 9.7 million. So the main, or the only business activity left in this category now is the quarries. We're recommending we apply it. We've also identified 10 other business activities that we're not going to apply. We recommend you do not apply competition policy for. So in summary then, we've got the significant business activities of waste, resources management and holiday parks, and we're applying full cost pricing reforms to them. We've got the corporatised Caloundra Event Centre, and that's subject to the board needs to meet the requirements there, and the Code of Competitive Conduct being applied to the quarries. For these 10 activities, we're recommending you do not apply national competition policy reforms, and the justification for not doing so is set out in Appendix B. And the appendix basically, we'll run through an example in a minute, sets out the justification. These activities we've identified that they still have fees and charges in the Register of Fees and Charges, but we are saying do not recognise them as business activities, primarily because they're internal service providers or they are regulatory governed matters that have the prices can't exceed full cost anyway. So in Appendix 1, for the 10 business activities, basically they go through, link it to the corporate plan and any policies we have, then looks at the public benefit objectives of the activity, and they're many and varied. Then it's looking at the target market and competition in there and how we're doing pricing. And in all of these cases, we're doing what we call cost-reflective pricing. So we try and recover as much of the cost as delivering the service that we can. So that brings us to the recommendation. And it's quite extensive, so I won't read it all.
Thank you. Councillor, someone to move the motion. Councillor Hungerford, seconder. Councillor Broderick. Thank you. Councillor Hungerford.
Through you, Madam Mayor, and I'll probably open this with a bit of an explanation for the general community out there. In the mid to late 1990s, a suite of market and economic reforms were introduced to stimulate growth and job creation in Australia. For local governments in Queensland, these reforms revolved around the following: the extension of a trade practices laws prohibiting anti-competitive activities to all businesses, including local government businesses. The introduction of competitive neutrality so that private businesses could compete on an equal footing with those owned by local government. The review and reform of all laws that restrict competition. And specific reform to price monitoring of the water industry. Now, the national competition policy reforms are applied to various identified business activities of council. Now, under the Local Government Act 2009, this is an annual report we have to do, and that's what we're doing today. And the only major change this year, pardon me, The Sunshine Coast holiday parks have been identified as a new significant business activity. The trigger for that being that they now have an expenditure over 9.7 million. So this report recommends that we're going to this year apply the full cost pricing to the Sunshine Coast Holiday Park significant business activity for the 26-27 financial year in accordance with the Local Government Act 2009. I commend this report to Council.
Thank you, Councillor Hungerford. Councillor Johnston.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I just have a question for Simon, through you. Right, we're applying full cost pricing to the holiday parks and to the waste and resource management. So the first question about that is, we're not prohibited from making a profit. Is that correct?
Through you, Madam Mayor. No, it's a minimum, not a maximum.
Yep. And then in relation to the quarries, it says apply the Code of Competitive Conduct to the quarry business activity. What's the difference between full cost pricing and Code of Competitive Conduct? And I'm mindful of the fact that the quarry is losing money at the present time. So.
Through you, Madam Mayor. It's just a different regime. So full cost pricing, commercialisation, corporatisation apply to the larger business activities, significant business activities. The Code of Competitive Conduct applies to smaller business activities like the quarry. It still involves setting your prices at full cost, so it's a bit of a name confusion, but the outcome is the same.
Right. So would I be correct in saying the Code of Competitive Conduct basically says that you can't undercut the market right here? Well, there's no chance of us doing that with the quarries. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. I have a question for you too, Mr. Crock. So with our holiday parks, and we have 6 of those holiday parks, the reason, if I understand it, that they're this year was because they reached the threshold of $9.7 million. Can you tell me what that involves? Is that expenditure? Is it revenue? What does it take to reach that threshold?
Expenditure.
Expenditure. So that we are spending that much in the operation of that business.
Yes, exactly. So the biggest expense for the holiday parks, we contract out the management of them. So the contracts we have for operation, that's the biggest expense. Things like electricity, fuel, gas, that sort of stuff.
Okay, thank you. And so this year then we had to undertake the public benefit assessment in deciding what to do, and then you have a recommendation that we continue with that full cost pricing. So is that because, having weighed all of those elements up, this was going to be the greatest benefit to our community? Is that the result that you've come to?
That's exactly right, yeah. The most benefit for the lowest cost.
Okay, thank you. And in order, so, and for the first time, it is for our holiday parks, because basically that expenditure this year has reached that limit where it wasn't before, but it was always increasing and it was just a matter of time. Is that the process that has to be followed?
Yes, that's what the legislation requires. Yep.
Okay, all right, thank you. That's all of my questions. Thank you for that. I guess, councillors, what we are endeavouring through this particular item and in following the legislation as required, ensuring that we comply in every element, but then also ensuring that we serve our community in the best possible way, both financially and also in the services that we provide here. So that through this report and through the extensive work that's been done and what happens through those holiday parks, we are absolutely serving our community, and in employing the full cost pricing is another example to our community of how we are managing our finances responsibly and into the future, that we are providing a service of holiday parks while at the same time returning to our community in a financial way and in a service way. So I commend the report to you. Councillor Hungerford, would you like to close? No, we are done. Okay, councillors, I'll now put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Crock. Moving on to item 8.6, and we welcome Ms Rudd to present the Queensland Audit Office First Interim Management Report. And here she is. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good morning, Madam Mayor, councillors, members of the executive, members of the public. This presentation relates to item 8.6, Queensland Audit Office First Interim Management Report for the financial year ended 30 June 2026. I'll cover the scope of the interim audit, key findings, current status of issues and what auditors will focus on next. The audit follows a staged approach across the financial year. Planning commenced in January, the first interim audit was completed in March, a second interim is underway in June, and the final audit will wrap up around August to September of this year. From a governance perspective, Council has a statutory obligation to prepare general purpose financial statements, which are audited by the Queensland Auditor General. The audit findings are first presented to the Audit Committee and then formally tabled at the next Ordinary Council meeting in line with legislative requirements. The first interim audit focused on reviewing key financial processes up to February 2026. This included controls, transaction accuracy and key accounting estimates. From this work, auditors identified 4 significant deficiencies and 13 other deficiencies, most of which relate to information systems. There are also 12 unresolved items carried forward from prior years. I'll cover the results in 2 parts, financial and information systems. On the financial side, there was 1 minor finding, which has already been addressed through updated work instructions. All prior year financial items are either resolved or progressing well. Technical papers were submitted on time, milestones have been met, and we're well positioned heading into the second interim and year-end audits. On information systems, a number of issues were identified. Management have completed a detailed review and provided responses to QAO with remediation plans in place. The report identifies some internal system improvements that Council is actively addressing. In terms of overall audit progress, all planned milestones and deliverables have been met to date. While information system control deficiencies have increased the amount of audit testing required, auditors are still able to rely on key controls. Importantly, the additional testing is not expected to delay completion of the audit. Remediation activity is continuing, with several prior year issues now closed or close to closure, and the remaining items are actively being addressed. Looking ahead, the audit will continue to focus on a number of areas including asset valuation, revenue recognition, procurement and expenditure classification, investment accounting and depreciation. Initial procedures have already started in these areas, with more detailed testing to come during the final audit phase. And the recommendation is that Council receive and note the report titled Queensland Audit Office First Interim Management Report to the financial year ended 30 June 2026.
Thank you, Ms Rudd. Councillors, a mover for this item, Councillor Broderick, and a seconder, Councillor Bunnag. Councillor Broderick.
Thank you, through you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Trish, for bringing this to us today. Just so everybody is aware, we have an audit committee. So contrary to what some people believe, council is audited on a very regular basis. So our audit committee is made up of external members, QAO, our Queensland Audit Officer in attendance, and also 2 councillors. That audit committee is chaired by an external member, and we meet at least 4 times a year, and there's an ongoing relationship between our CEO and ELT and our audit committee as well throughout the other times of the year. So this report reflects the value of our ongoing relationship with the Queensland Audit Office, and their external audit provides us with independent insight, which is really important, not just where we are today, but where we need to get to in order to be a high-performing organisation. The focus of this report is clear direction. So the QAO's findings give us clarity, and clarity allows us to move forward confidently in the way we should be and getting on with the things that need to be done. We value the relationship with the QAO, and we value the opportunity to strengthen our systems, our governance, and our culture of continuous improvement, which is what we've been working really diligently on recently. It keeps us accountable, and it keeps our direction transparent. What matters now is the way forward. Our actions are clearly identified, the expectations are clear, and there is an urgency in resolving the issues that are raised so we can get on with the rest of the priorities. By working closely with the QAO, we can ensure that improvements are implemented quickly, consistently, and with accountability. Our regular meetings with both the Audit Committee and the relationship built with QAO allow that to happen. The insights provided through this external audit are an important part of that journey, and I welcome the opportunity to continue working constructively with the QAO as we move ahead. I commend this motion. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Broderick. Councillor Burns.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Thanks, Ms Rudd, for the report. Are you able, just a question on behalf of residents, could you please just define what is significant deficiency, a deficiency, etc., that's held in the audit report from the QAO?
Thank you, Councillor Burns. Through you, Madam Mayor. Absolutely. So it's worth noting, I can talk to the financial deficiencies. So the financial significant deficiencies had previously been a deficiency in prior years. And my understanding is that QAO wanted more action, and so they've elevated that to significant deficiencies. And it is related to the item in the financials that it relates to. So in this instance, those significant deficiencies related to assets and how we're managing and accounting for those assets.
Okay, so something that may be deficient is the QAO saying maybe a council process or a structure or a way of managing that is not up to a standard that they think would be best practice. So that gives council an opportunity to respond and to put in place better mechanisms. And then if it's not necessarily done in a way that's commensurate with that, the QAO might go, look, this is still a matter for attention, and therefore we would like to elevate it. So it's kind of like going from orange light to kind of going, hey, we really need to address this. So the difference between a significant and a deficiency is really how the QAO is determining a matter of urgency for council to address.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Broderick, would you like to close? No. Okay. Councillors, I will now put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you. Thanks, Ms Rudd. We move now to item 8.7. We welcome Ms Burden. The item is the Delegation to the Chief Executive Officer Annual Review. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Delegations are an important part of Council's governance and decision-making framework. There are over 170 acts, regulations and local laws which require local governments to take action or make decisions in some way, and it would be impractical for councils to exercise all of those statutory requirements without the ability to delegate to qualified staff. The Local Government Act under Section 257 allows councils to delegate anything that is lawfully able to be delegated. That is, council cannot delegate anything that legislation regulates must be exercised by council resolution, and for example, the adoption of the annual budget or the making of a local law. And the only officer position that council can delegate to is the Chief Executive Officer. And this is done via an instrument of delegation, which must be reviewed annually, with the last review occurring in June 2025. The CEO is then able to subdelegate to appropriate council officers and must keep a register of all delegations. The annual review of council's delegation to the CEO ensures that any gaps or changes in legislation are identified. This year's review has identified 5 additional pieces of legislation, both state and Commonwealth, which are recommended for inclusion in the list of legislation delegated in Schedule 1 of the CEO delegation. And these are detailed on the screen and in the report. The latest review also identified the need to include criteria for administering state facilitated development applications, additional to the criteria and conditions that already apply in the delegation instrument relating to the Planning Act. So the report is recommending that the council adopt the updated council to CEO delegation as part of the required annual review, and following adoption, any updates that need to be made to the CEO's subdelegation to council officers and the register of delegations will be undertaken. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Ms Burden. Councillors, a mover for this item, Councillor Broderick, and a seconder, Councillor Johnston. Councillor Broderick.
Thank you.
You're up and down a lot today,
yes, that's
Councillor.
Okay. That's okay. Thank you for the presentation. We've just mentioned there in, just starting with some questions, sorry, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you.
I speak to this one. So just in relation to the updates that you spoke about, are there any specific delegation updates that we need to know about in this particular presentation and this year's adoption of this? What are the updates and how do they affect us?
Through you, Madam Mayor, the only updates were those 5 additional pieces of legislation that were picked up in the review. Council subscribes to a service which provides updates to legislation that affect local government on twice a year, and we then compare our delegation to that list and that service. And so 5 were picked up where they weren't on the schedule of legislation that we had. So that might come across because of the new legislation, a slight amendment that occurs. But each one of those, none of them are significant of those 5, but they may require council to do something at some point and therefore needs to be delegated. And it could be as simple as needing to require a report to the minister, but someone needs to be able to sign that off. So,
yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor. This item reflects our annual review of delegations to the CEO, ensuring that they remain consistent with our current legislation, like we've just spoken about, and the new ones that have been picked up as well, and to support our efficient and day-to-day operations of council in the organisation. So our delegations are fundamental to our good governance. And they empower appropriately qualified staff, the CEO, delegation to our ELT and other staff as well, in order to get the jobs done in the way that they need to. So I commend this report to Council, and I may have some more questions later. But thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Broderick. Councillor Bunnag.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just have a question through you, and Mr Joyce is probably the best person to answer it. So, in the delegation criteria with respect to the Planning Act 2016, it sets out that there are a number of circumstances where the delegated officer may exercise the powers of the Act, of the local government under the Planning Act, except for a number of circumstances, including where development is over $100 million, as was the case this morning on the earlier item. But in paragraph D, it says an application for a proposed development where a substantial number of submissions have been received during the notification part objecting to the proposed development. Can we clarify what in the officers' minds is a substantial number of submissions?
Thank you. And Phil Joyce is our Acting Director for Sustainable Growth and Planning. Thank you, Mr Joyce.
Yeah, through the chair. So we operate on a number of 100 objections.
Thank you, Mr Joyce. I think through the chair, if I might just speak to this, I'm obviously going to be supporting the delegations because otherwise we'd be an extremely busy council over a 12-month period without the ability to delegate to the Chief Executive Officer and to other officers in the organisation. But I would say in the preparation of this report, perhaps for next year, there's an opportunity to actually articulate what a substantial number of submissions looks like, given the fact that in paragraph A of that delegation criteria, we actually do set out that it's $100 million if it exceeds that level of investment. So from my perspective, I don't understand why we wouldn't articulate what a substantial number means, notwithstanding that a councillor has the opportunity to call up and ask for a development application to be considered by all of council. But I think just for the public's benefit to actually understand what that is in the future would be beneficial. I'll obviously support it today for the reasons I've articulated, but perhaps next year we could look to address that. Thanks, Councillor Bunnag. Councillor Johnston.
Just so that I've got things right, Madam Mayor. The question, the 5 legislation items, what are they? Are they the ones that are legislative updates for 2026?
Through you, Madam Mayor, they're the 5 that are listed in the report, and well, there's an explanation.
On my computer screen it says there's 6. Which one
the
doesn't apply?
state facilitated developments.
We're just going to get the presentation up with the page for you, Councillor.
Yeah. So there's 5 pieces of legislation and then the criteria around state facilitated development applications that was added to the delegation, setting conditions around that.
Right.
Okay. Great. Councillor Broderick, would you like to close on this one? No? All right. I will now put the matter to the vote then, the motion. All those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you. Thanks, Ms Burden. Moving on to item 8.8, which is the transfer of council-owned land in Battery Hill to Unitywater, and we welcome Mr Woodbridge to present this item.
Thank you. Good morning, Madam Mayor, councillors and ELT. This report seeks Council's approval to transfer council-owned land located in Battery Hill to Unitywater. 3 properties located in Battery Hill were purchased by Council to widen the overland flow path and create new culverts across Buderim Street. Unitywater made a financial contribution to Council to acquire 1 property located in Battery Hill for the stormwater upgrades. Now that the property has been demolished, the land must be transferred to Unitywater at no additional cost apart from any assessed transfer duty for which Unitywater will be responsible. Unitywater will then grant an easement in gross to Council for drainage and public thoroughfare purposes over the land. Council will be responsible for the ongoing maintenance of the land. Details of the property and financial contribution made by Unitywater are included in confidential attachment 1. In preparing this report, it is recommended that confidential attachment 1 be considered confidential as it contains information in relation to a commercial matter. This report recommends that Council resolves that an exception in accordance with Section 236 of the Local Government Regulation be applied to dispose of the Council-owned land located in Battery Hill to Unitywater, who is a government agency. If the recommendation in this report is endorsed by Council, it is noted that the CEO will delegate the management of the land transfer to Council's strategic property team. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, a mover, that is Councillor Landsberg, and seconded Councillor Broderick. Thank you. Councillor Landsberg.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There's probably no need to speak in depth to this process, although I would just like to share I have been involved in resumptions of properties in regards to this issue here, and also other properties in Flounder for a major transport corridor. So it does bear heavily when we do have to do this, but I'll be supporting this recommendation today for Unitywater. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Landsberg. Councillor Johnston.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've just got one question. The easement that that's going to be granted to us, is that over the entirety of the block?
Through you, Madam Mayor, yes, Councillor Johnston, over the entire lot.
So that's good, because that explains why we're responsible for maintenance of the entire block. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, Councillor Landsberg, would you like to close?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I did ask a question as well in the information session, which was obviously the team answered. It was obviously an attachment, and it was just in regards to stormwater overflow in regards to a development that's occurring next to the Curramaty Hotel. So I was happy with that response. Look forward to support with this officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillors, I'll now put the motion to the vote. Those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Thank you, team. We move now, and Ms Lane is going to present item 8.9, the disposal lease of council-owned land to Maroochydore, in Maroochydore. Thank you, Ms Lane.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor. Good morning, councillors, ELT and members of the gallery. The purpose of this report is to seek an exception from Council in accordance with section 236 of the Local Government Regulation to enter into a new lease with an existing tenant over 71 Sugar Road in Maroochydore. The land at lot 336 on registered plan 88443 was purchased by Council in October 2023 for the Maud Street and Sugar Road upgrade project. The property is fitted out for use as an office and will eventually be required for the project, but can continue to be occupied and leased in the interim. The tenant operated their business from the premises prior to ownership being transferred to Council. The fixed term lease expired in January and the tenancy is currently holding over as a monthly tenancy. Agreement has been reached on key terms with the tenant, which can be found in confidential attachment 1. It is recommended that should councillors wish to discuss the information in the confidential attachment, Council resolve to close the meeting under section 254J, paragraph 3 of the Local Government Regulation, as the attachment contains information relating to commercial matters where public discussion could prejudice Council's interest. This report therefore seeks the decision of Council that an exception to the Local Government Regulation applies to the disposal of an interest in land by lease other than by auction or tender, as the lease is renewed to an existing tenant. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Natoli is the mover, seconded Councillor Bunnag. Thank you. Councillor Natoli.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is pretty straightforward. It's just a continuation of allowing the tenant to stay there until we need the property, so generating revenue for council while we have that property, so I totally support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Natoli. There are no other councillors. Councillor Natoli, did you wish to close? No? Okay, I'll put that motion to the vote then as well. All those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Thank you, team. Okay. Now, councillors, there are no notices of motion today, so we'll move on to the petitions. Councillor Johnston, I believe you have a petition to table.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I have a petition, and the lead petitioner is Jennifer Brunton of Palmwoods, and it's signed by 183 people. And it says, we, the undersigned residents of Palmwoods, respectfully request urgent upgrades to the existing playgrounds at Federation Park Playground, Calora Park Playground and Old Orchard Playground. These playgrounds are outdated and are primarily designed for children under 5 years of age, leaving very limited opportunity for older children to engage in activities and challenging and developmental play. Palmwoods is a growing family community, yet there is currently no playground that properly caters for children above the age of 5. And it goes on about the type of facility, etc. I move that.
Yes. So Councillor Johnston is moving, seconded Councillor Natoli. Councillor Johnston, would you like to speak to this now?
Yes, I would. In the 2027-28 Capital Works program, there is 150,000 that's proposed to be spent on the Federation Park Playground, and I've spoken to this lady in relation to that. Obviously, that's probably not going to be enough. So we'll be working with the community as well as one of the community organisations that usually sponsors this sort of thing to do that. Calora Park, unfortunately, there's not much we can do about that for the present time because Main Roads Department are going to put in a roundabout which takes up part of the park, which they already own. And Old Orchard Playground is a playground that is currently undergoing an upgrade. And I'm not sure that we can do much about improving that situation. But the people of Palmwoods and Woombye area have a considerable concern in relation to this matter because whereas previously I used to go to Quota Park in Nambour, many of the parents and most of the children are now consider it's not safe for them to do so.
Thank you, Councillor Johnston. Just before you deliver that, we'll take the vote. So Councillor Johnston has moved acceptance of the petition. Those in favour of receiving the petition, and that is carried unanimously. Now, Councillor Johnston, if you'd like to deliver that to the CEO.
Can I just thank Jennifer Brunt for all the hard work that she's done to get all these signatures?
Certainly. If that wasn't recorded online because you weren't near your microphone, Councillor Johnston wanted to thank the petitioner for all of the work she did in collecting those signatures. So thank you, and that is well acknowledged. Thank you, Councillor Johnston. Now, Councillor Hungerford, you have a petition to table today.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I have a petition here with 36 signatures. Marilyn Kelty is the lead petitioner. We, the undersigned residents of Moorabinda Street, Buderim, respectfully petition the Sunshine Coast Council to implement the very cost-effective road safety measures to reduce and calm the passage of traffic on Moorabinda Street. The speed limit be reduced to 40 kilometres an hour. Parking limited to one side, no parking. A rubber speed hump to be constructed on the first bend from Gilbert Street end, speed bump ahead. No right turn into Moorabinda from Illawong Street. A stop sign to replace the give way sign at the intersection of Moorabinda and Illawong Streets. A warning traffic sign indicating children crossing installed at this intersection opposite the children's playground. And a pedestrian crossing across Illawong Street before the intersection leading to the children's playground. I'm happy to move that if I can have a seconder.
Seconded, Councillor Natoli. Thank you, Councillor Hungerford. If you'd like to speak to this now.
Speak to it. There's a page here explaining in detail the reasons for asking for this, and it'll probably go longer than the time I have to speak to this. But I'd say this is resulting from, and I've had petitions from Tulip Lane, Lindsay Road, Mill Road, Townsend Road on the same sort of issues. And I believe this is a symptom of, and the state government's heavy preference for growth to be infill development primarily in their residential areas. Where this is happening, especially in Buderim, and I'm getting hammered with it consistently, duplexes and townhouses going in everywhere, where a single block gets cleared, build on 90% of it, and you've got the higher density there. And the other compounding one there in their planning is one parking space, no matter how many bedrooms. That's creating more traffic on the streets here. So not only the volume, but the parking as well, which is identified here. And I've seen that referred to in the state government stuff as gentle density. Well, I can tell you the Buderim residents don't think it's gentle at all, and I get constantly harangued on it, on this intensification and the way this is going and changing the character of that area. But I commend this here because I think we're going to get more of these sort of things over time. But I'm happy to have that be presented to the CEO so that the traffic branch can assess this and come back with a detailed response.
Thank you, Councillor Hungerford. I'll now put that motion to the vote. That is that we receive this petition to the CEO. Those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you, Councillor Hungerford. You may move that to the CEO. Also recognising that the petitioner is in the gallery this morning. Welcome to you and thank you for your involvement in our community and decision making. Okay. Councillors, one final item. Before we move into confidential session, do any of you wish to declare any personal interests in relation to item 11.1? Please raise your hand if you do. Okay, the Chief Executive Officer advises that item 11.1 contains confidential information relating to negotiations for taking the land by the local government under the Acquisition of Land Act 1967, Queensland, the Act. For this reason, it is recommended that Council move into confidential session in accordance with Section 254J of the Local Government Regulation 2012 to consider and discuss the information in this report. Noting, of course, Council's decision on this item will be made during open session, which will be viewable by the public. Councillors, is someone prepared to move that we close the meeting to discuss agenda item 11.1? Councillor Suarez, and seconded Councillor Natoli. I will now put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, welcome back. Councillors, we now consider item 11.1, the acquisition of land, Maroochy River. Councillors, I note that Councillor Suarez is prepared to move the item and Councillor Bunnag to second. Thank you to you both. Councillor Suarez, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor, just briefly. Yes, I support the officer's recommendation to try and resolve some issues that were raised by residents and continue negotiations in good faith. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Suarez. No other councillors who wish to speak? Councillor Suarez, do you wish to close? No. Okay. Councillors, I'll now put the motion to the vote. Those in favour? Councillors Broderick, Burns, Natoli, Johnston, Dixon, Hungerford, Bunnag, Suarez, Law and Mayor Natoli. Those against? Councillor Landsberg. The motion is carried. Thank you. Thank you, team. Thank you for that presentation over that extensive session. Councillors, as we have no further items on today's agenda, the next ordinary meeting will be held on Thursday, the 23rd of July at 9 a.m. So I will now declare today's meeting closed at 12:55. Thank you and have a good day.